right, Jamaica, we know what a maternity leave is. I don't. But this morning, we're looking at this type of leave as it relates to the rights of domestic workers. And from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, we have the Director of National, well, let me start again. The Director of National Insurance, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, is that how it's said? Ms. Portia Magnus, good morning. And we also have Patrina Minto-Powell, Conciliation Officer in the Ministry of Labor. Yes. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because there are a lot of issues between employers and domestic workers, not knowing what is what, how is it supposed to work. So before we even get into maternity leave, tell us what is happening in Jamaica with employers and domestic workers. What are you seeing as some of the major issues?
Well, a lot of the major issues are persons are not aware. When you go in, I don't know if it's because of the fact that it's a domestic worker, a lot of employers do not know that they're supposed to compensate the worker for maternity leave. And so a lot of the workers come to the Ministry of Labor to seek compensation.
Okay, and how does it work? So maternity leave, you get how many weeks as a domestic worker?
Under the Act, you get 12 weeks. So 8 weeks with pay and 4 without.
8 weeks with pay and 4 without. As a domestic worker, how long do you have to be working at the...
You have to be working at least 52 weeks.
Okay.
At the time when you're going off, at least 52 weeks. And 18 weeks, and 18 hours per week.
Oh, 18 hours per week. 52 weeks to be entitled...
To be entitled to maternity leave.
To maternity leave. All right. What happens if the employer says, no, I'm not giving you maternity leave, or if your work has been terminated because of the pregnancy, what happens there?
Well, if the employer decides that they're not going to compensate the worker for maternity leave, and of course they are qualified, then that's where the Ministry of Labor comes in. The employee can come to the Ministry of Labor and seek compensation. And from there, the Ministry of Labor will act on their behalf. Sometimes it's just information. Sometimes the employer really do not know that this is supposed to happen. So you have to dialogue between both parties just to ensure that the worker is compensated properly.
Okay. Ms. Magnus, how do where do we find the information for employers and domestic workers? Where do we find the guidelines so that we can kind of not have this conflict?
Well, we do have literature items, sorry, and we have a number of brochures that's from the labor side, also the ministry's website, and our labor laws. But you are also, in terms of the maternity leave, I can just flip the switch a bit. The maternity leave to be paid is actually paid from the National Insurance Scheme for domestic workers. Right.
Okay, so how does that work? So it's not the employer giving...
The work for domestic workers, you're paid under the National Insurance Scheme. However, the onus is on the employer to contribute to the scheme, because you know the scheme is a contributory scheme. So if you don't contribute, then there would be nothing for the scheme to pay. And that's where a lot of employers do not know, but that's where now the employee can come to the Ministry of Labor to seek redress.
Okay, so the employer makes a contribution, and then when the maternity leave is asked for from the employee, the scheme is the one who pays the employee.
Right.
Now we all know that a lot of people aren't making those contributions for the employer, but that's what I want to get into. How is it supposed to work? You said 18 hours a week for 52 weeks. What if somebody is only working 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week?
You would not be qualified.
You wouldn't be qualified.
You have to work a minimum at least 18 hours per week.
And what's the minimum wage? I want to get all of this.
The minimum wage is 6,200. So regardless of what the employer, let's say you're working $10,000 per week.
Right.
If the minimum wage is 6,200, that's what the scheme would pay you. So that's the leaf. That's the fund that you would get from the scheme.
All right. Let's look at how... I want to, so contracts, let's look at contracts, because there are different kinds of, and the world is changing the way that we work. So let's look at it. Here I'm contracted.
Right.
So I can't get maternity leave here, right? The way that I'm contracted. I don't get maternity leave. So what arrangement do you have to make with a domestic worker? Are there different kinds of arrangements so that both are protected, the employee and the employer?
Under the contract, under the Maternity Leave Act, a contract can
We
be
need to pull
oral.
up this act.
It's the Act of 1979.
Yeah.
Under the Act, the contract can be oral or written. Now, you know you have independent contractor. If you're not an independent contractor, and as long as you're considered an employee, right? If the employee meets, if you're an employee that works 18 hours per week, and at the end of the period you work 52 weeks, then you would be qualified for maternity leave. And that is why you have the Ministry of Labor. Because even though you're an employee, when persons are going to set up business and do stuff, they'll get that requirements. But when it comes on to the employee benefits, they don't check that out.
Right.
And that is why we are there to guide them further.
Right.
Okay.
And if I may just add too, for domestic workers, we do know that we have days workers. So where we have days workers, they would be like self-employed persons, right?
Well, that's what I'm trying. Yeah.
Right.
the
And so
different-
they now would be required to make the contributions on their own, which is a
Right.
minimum of $100 per week.
Right. And how do you make those contributions as an individual?
Well, first of all, you have to be registered with the National Insurance Scheme, and we will give you an antiquated method, we call it, of making the contributions, which is a stamp card. You purchase the NIS stamps from the post office, $100 per week. You just put them on. At the end of the year, you take them into our office, and we'll give you a new card.
That
And
process is kind of tedious to you. Know?
I know, but
It-
I mean,
It can be.
when does your ministry kind of beef up? They make it easy for people because people just can't be bothered.
Well, we're going
go
through-
to
But can I
post
tell you,
office,
it is
go
not-
down here so, go down here so.
But
People are
Empress, can I
trying to
tell
eat,
you, it
and
is
that
not-
6,200 can't feed some family.
yes, but it's not a hard process, you know. It may sound that way, but it's not a hard process because most of us, depending on the community that we live,
There's
the
a post office.
is near to us.
Yes.
And you don't have to go individually. You don't have to go for yourself.
don't
You
have
can
to
send
go
anybody
every-
to just
every
go and get
week
it.
either.
And you're saying also, because they're giving me the rap signal, and I think
Sure.
this is a very important conversation, especially with the issues that we've heard about with domestic workers and
Yes.
employees. So the employer can be guilty of an offense,
Yes.
right, and liable under the law if the employment of the worker is terminated wholly or
Yes.
partially due to
Yes.
pregnancy or delivery without probable cause.
Yes.
So you can't say, boy, she's pregnant and
So you
terminate the work.
terminate her. You will find that, but after dialogue with the employer, then the employee is reinstated. The fines now, of course, they were from 1979, so they're small, but the ministry is looking at that now, but that has not been completed yet. So I think all the fines are $1,000 or less.
All right. And I just want to add, domestic work is a glorious work, you know.
I
I
agree.
call it my mini-me.
Yes.
Okay,
Can me
better
wash,
believe
cook, and
it.
clean. Actually, may I look for somebody call me. Ministry of Labor will guide me. Thank you so much for sharing
You're
that
welcome.
information with us. And hopefully there'll be more public education
Yes.
about
Yes.
this because we do
Yeah.
need it, for both sides. Thank you so much. From the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Director of National Insurance, Portia Magnus, and Conciliation Officer, she's a lady that you meet with when you have problems, Patrina Minto Powell.